So Mike and I are building our own house, and I thought it would be fun to show you some of the things that we're doing to build our own house that are pretty money-saving and actually pretty fun. So if you look at our floor here, this looks like flagstone, or I hope it looks a little like sandstone. So I'm going to show you how to do this, because this is actually not stone at all. It's faux stone. So this is our bathroom, just to give you an idea of what the costs for this are. This is about 30 square feet in here, and I used about 1.5 bags of cement in here. Each bag of cement costs $6, $7. So rather than spending thousands of dollars to put epoxy on this floor, we're going to spend a few $100s to put faux rock down all over the house. So this is not a fast process. You cannot pour the floor all at once. You have to do it 1 or 2 buckets at a time, because you're going to be carving out that stone a little bit at a time. There are presses and there are forms that you can use to do this. I find that this looks much more realistic and artistic, because no 2 stones are the same, because you're making them yourself. So here are the ingredients that you need to make this. The first thing we start with, Quikrete sand topping mix. Now this may sound like a plug, and if it is, it is. I like Quikrete better than any other brand of cement. I've made ponds, and I've made patios, and I've just done it by hand myself, and I just find that the Quikrete mixes better and comes out a better mix. So do what you like, but I just found Quikrete works better for me. So we take the sand topping mix, and another tip about mixing cement, if you're not used to mixing cement, this is from my own mistakes, start with your liquid in the bottom of your bucket first. If you start with your dry stuff, it's much harder to mix. Another thing that helps is to have one of these little spinner mixers. They're not expensive. They're under $10. This is actually a paint mixer rather than one of those big cement mixers, which costs a lot more, you know, attached to this little drill. So to start out, I start out with 1/2 gallon of water, and then I have about 3/4 of a cup of this polymer. It's acrylic polymer, and then there are a number of different brands of this that you can use. My husband Mike calls it milk, that I mix into here. Since our layer of cement is going to be anywhere from 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch thick, you want to make sure you add that polymer as a binding agent to it. And that is exactly what the sand mix is made to do, is to create surfaces from 1/2 inch to 2 inches thick. But because I'm going on the low side, I want that polymer there to give it more lasting power. So now I'm going to add my cement and start it mixing. Another tip is, I don't have safety glasses on. It's a good idea to wear safety glasses. The cement will splash, and you don't want to get this in your eyes. So one of the things to notice is that while I mix it, I don't mix my cement all in at once. I put in a little bit at a time, then I mix it up, and then I add a little bit more at a time. So it's pretty sloppy at first. So the thickness of the cement is critical. You want to be able to spread it and smooth it and shape it without it being too thick or too thin and runny. So my rule of thumb, when I mix this and get it to the consistency I want, is that I want to be able to leave an impression like that with my mixer in it, and then I'm like, that is just about the right consistency for it. I'm ready to start spreading this section of the floor. There are some tricks to making the transitions between the hard stone and the wet cement. And part of those tricks come when you're spreading this out. So as you spread it out, you'll notice that it's much easier for me to blend it with this wet cement than with the hard cement. You cannot pour this all at once, or you will not be able to carve into the stone. Notice I've got some different. This was done just a couple of days ago. This was done probably 4 or 5 days ago. So the wetter it is, the easier it is to spread. Unfortunately, if it's too wet, you will not be able to carve into the stone, because you can't stand on stone that is soft. So you have to do it in sections and be patient. I've got about 250 square feet done right now on this house, and I've taken 2 days off from work. It's taken me about 5 days, I would say, to do about 250 square feet. So this is not a quick or short process. It certainly is money saving, and it comes out beautiful when you're done, but it's not for the impatient. Notice that when I come to this edge here, I've got my cement has tapered just a little here so that I can overlap just a bit so that I can get that seal there between the edge of the cement and this topping mix. And that's critical. And I had to learn how to do this by making mistakes. So notice also that I have a blunt edge here so that the cement butts right up against that edge so I don't have bumps or any sort of uncomfortable rises in the cement that aren't going to look right. As you spread the cement, this is about 1/2 inch to about 3/4 of an inch thick. You don't have to make it all level because rock is not all level. Your aim is to make it look like rock. Okay, so as I've spread this out, you see there are a few tricks that I use to spread this out. One is I want to make sure that I have a good seal between that dry and wet. So I'm going to do that without overlapping the old stones too much. So that's really critical that you get a good seal along that edge without overlapping the stones very much. The other thing to do as you're spreading that out is to remember it doesn't need to be flat because it's stone, but we do want it to look natural. I want mine to look as if the wind has blown the sandstone. I'm a desert hiker. Now, one of the things I want to do is make sure that I have a smooth top. Well, an old cement working trick is to jiggle that trowel so it starts to work the water up to the surface. The cement is just a touch dry. I make it just a little wetter, but I'm still able to get that water worked up to the surface so that I'm going to be able to get a nice, smooth top layer on this that looks like stone. Before I add the color to it, I want to make sure it's smooth like that because I haven't mixed the color into my cement the way a lot of people would do. I don't want to do that because when I carve into my cement, I want to see the cement underneath so that I can see the cement between the stones. So I am just about ready to add my color. I've got a nice smooth surface here. Okay, and I've also tapered the edges right here so that when I go to carve this out and to prepare it for the next section of rock that's going to go in there, it will be able to butt up against it nicely. And it's much easier to mix wet with wet. That's not hard to create a nice smooth transition there. It's the wet with the dry that's difficult. So now I'm going to take my fairy dust or my mortar dye. I've chosen a blonde here, and I'm just going to sprinkle this on top. Like I said, I didn't want to mix it in. I didn't want to get it all the same color. I wanted it to be a different color underneath than it is on top. And I want it to be nice and smooth on top so that I don't work too much of this color into the cement. So I make sure it's almost ready to be left to set. By the way, notice I have rubber gloves on. This won't hurt you, but the cement will if you get the cement on your hands. If you are working in cement all day and you don't have gloves on, it'll eat the skin right off your hands, because I've done that before. So do be careful. Sometimes if you use these little thin gloves, you have to replace them from time to time. No big deal. So I like that because I like to have hands that are kind of relatively clean and that can manipulate things better. So here we go. We're going to spread our color, which is so pretty. And the idea is you want this to be smooth like stone and also make sure you get color up on those edges. That's going to be critical in helping with those transitions and in helping that to blend. So as you do this, you're sculpting with the cement actually a little bit. You want to make sure marks like this aren't in your cement. So you're going to be really cautious to give it a really light touch as you drag across that cement. Rocks don't have little rubbles like that, So I try to make sure that although I have trowel marks, which are very natural and look very rock-like, that I don't have anything that rises up as I do it. The trowel marks are fine, but if we have cement that rises up high, then it doesn't look very natural. So now, this is ready to leave for about 5 or 6 hours to dry. And then we come back and we card it. I'm going to catch a couple of little spots here that I have other places, on other pours. But we'll be ready to carve and to finish it in about 5 or 6 hours. Here's the reality of the situation. It takes 5 or 6 hours to dry when the temperature is not too cold. Cement drying is directly related to temperature. So it is now 9 hours later. I did this at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's now 11 o'clock at night. And you cannot leave this till morning. You must be sure to carve this while it is still wet enough to carve, or you will have one solid slab and you're lost. So, 11 o'clock at night, I'm going to carve the stones into this. The nice part of it is that it doesn't take that long, it's very quick, and this is your big tool. It's a butter knife. So when you carve into this, you are going to just randomly carve your shapes in. Now that it's dry enough to be carved, you're going to randomly carve these stone shapes in. And one of the keys to, there are 2 keys to doing this. One is along this edge, notice that I made this a little blunt so that when I add the cement to it for the next section, I have a nice blunt edge to do it against. And the second is that when you carve it in, you must make sure that this is beveled so that you make a nice tract here. And there is my first stone. Now I try to make it look like stone and the way stone would look when we carve in, or how it would look if I had laid this stone into the cement. And I'm going to do this very quickly. There's no need to be real careful about this because this is rock, and rock is random. Everybody's rock is going to look a little different, and that's totally okay. And I just do it as fast as I can. It will take me probably about an hour to do this section of floor that I've done here this evening. And I try to make it look as much like rock as I can. Like how I carve it out. Then I have a nice little brush right here to get rid of the crumbs. If you do this when it is too wet, you will mark this stone with brush marks. So you must make sure it's dry enough to be able to brush away these crumbs. And that's it. So, a couple of points here. As you can see, I'm carving along here. There's no special way to do this. The more randomly you do this, the better it's going to look because it's stone. But the first point is, this must be done before you put up your final walls, in case you hadn't noticed that, because your final walls look for a minute more finished when they sit on the cement. The second thing is, I talked about the edges. Notice here's the crack between my stones. Now, this is where I had it overlap. Right here, I'm going to take my knife now and just scrape off little bits, these little bits that are crumbly here, so I have a nice smooth rock where that transition is. When this dries, you will not see this transition now. And it will work out just beautifully. There is a way to fix transitions if it gets a little too crumbly or if it looks a little too bad, and I'll show you that just before we finish. Okay, I've got all of the stones carved out about here. So, just a last few reminders as you do it. And one is, as you come here to the edges of these dry stones, you just scrape off some of that cement and then draw your line here. Notice I have a rounded edge to the knife, and that's the second reminder. Make sure you have a beveled edge. If you go straight into that cement, you're going to crack that cement. So you have to make sure that you come in at an angle. And thirdly, as you finish this off, make sure this is blunt to be prepared for the next round of cement that will be going in when you do this tomorrow. Because it's a little tough when you're doing it late at night. So, lastly, watch your temperature. This took a longer time to dry because our temperature was colder. When it's warmer, it will dry faster. You don't want to let this get solid, and then it's like this, and it's uncarvable. These will now dry and match this color exactly. Here's a little tip. Sometimes when the floor gets all dry, you realize that some of your transitions are still kind of showy. You can see right here, I've got some pretty obvious cement on my stone that I don't like there. So a little trick I've learned is to take some 120 grit sandpaper and your sander, and those little spots start to sand right out. So that's a little trick to clean up some of your edges after you get done with your floor. And that's about it. I am ready for bed, and as my father would say, you look like 5 miles of gravel road. So I hope that you've learned from this, and I hope you have a lot of fun making the floors for whatever project you have. Thanks.